all right. So, we're forward again, and you know what it is. We're just going to go right in GLM season one, doing everything that we can to not only be in the space, but also just make sure that we keep transmitting the message, but we really do move on. Now, one of the first things that I wanted to talk about today was this thing that I keep seeing everywhere. And at first I was like, I mean, are they really serious about this? But then as I keep seeing it more and more, it lets me know not only are they serious about this, but when I kind of check back, even on what I know, I'm definitely guilty of the same thing. And this is that they're saying like even the some of the biggest AI firms, like in this case, Anthropic, which is Claude, and of course, OpenAI, et cetera, that they don't actually understand how AI works. Okay. Well, that's kind of the ad for this, like, huh? And first, like when I kept seeing these ads or, just like write ups and stuff that we still don't really know how this works, I just kind of took that as like, when someone just says things, I don't know. I don't know how I took it, maybe like clickbait or whatever. But as I'm investigating it more and more, I've come to again just understand that there's some basic fundamentals about how LLMs work that nobody really knows about, even the engineers. And I wondered if that could be like what we would say is like the black box of something like this, or how they say they use this term, the black box, and somebody may have to pull that up because I'm not, I'll kind of throw it up here, and I just want to hear your input on this. But what I mean by black box is if we have something that we don't really know how it works, so thus it could work like anything, it could be like a whole nother life form. What Well, of course there's also the concept of a black box in a plane. But just in general, isn't there a term that means like, oh, it's like a black box? You see, I want to check that out. You know anything about that?
Immediately I feel like what comes to mind is the Kaaba.
That's for me too, because that's the biggest black box of them all. But we were definitely getting to that next, so I'm glad that you bought that up. But check this out right here. Yeah, the black box, right? So right here it says, what does it mean when someone says it's a black box? And it says a black box is a metaphor is used to talk about some computational process which has known inputs and output, but whose internal workings are not known. Okay. It's an idea that goes back to the beginning of cybergenetics and modern computing. Did you know anything about that? Have you ever heard of this?
Synchronicity there, because I've been going through the psychocybernetics, which goes into the it's a teleogy, and it's just really speaking about how human beings were built to have a purpose and a design. So cybernetics has been coming through, and I know we even had the tribe vibes where you mentioned the black box. So for me, a lot of it has to do with like comprehending the language that we're speaking. Even with the advent or the introduction of Sybil, has really assisted me in learning how to navigate conversation where everything is essentially a prompt and a response. So that's what was the first thing that really came to my mind.
I just thought it's funny that we have this hyper intelligence, but it's not like they can pin this thing down to like how laptops work and what we need to build it. This one's got this open end, and even though we're developing it and using it, supposedly they don't really understand how it works. And that to me seems to be like the direct how it could be extraterrestrial technology. Because if you're using something and you don't really know how it works and is that advanced, that means that it's more advanced than where you are since you don't know how it works. It's just one of those things that something was saying to me like, yo, pay attention to this though. You keep seeing this thing, you keep seeing these articles, they're like, oh, we don't even know how it works. Oh, there's a great danger here, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, these dudes just really trying to get their book sold. And then, when I started hearing the terminology black box, and this was just today, me looking it up and then seeing, oh, this is a known term. And it kind of makes sense. Like when we look at a circuit, right? And or the silicone, right? And you see this little black chip and it's like, you don't really know how that works, but some people do. but they're actually saying with AI, nobody really knows how it works. So we just kind of, keep that addendum there.
As I'm hearing you guys talk about some of this black box technology, I can't help but keep thinking about the Black Mirror conversation we were just having, and about where some of that even comes from, even going back to, what is it, the 1600s or something, with John Dee talking through the Black Mirror, and how some of that technology, even though we don't even necessarily think about, obsidian stones, as technology, we're talking about crystals and being able to use crystals in a lot of different things. But then, we have crystals in our phones, we have crystals in our computers, we have crystals in our blood, so like this crystal technology is a real thing, and we're talking about black mirrors, and we're looking at a black mirror, every time we're looking at our computer screen, every time we're looking at our phone, try to explain that to somebody 200 years ago, it'd be like, huh? So we're talking about technology, and what I feel like is we're starting to get to is some of this X-class technology.
Yeah, because it's still like that. It's still like that, just because, like, we're even saying, oh, but somebody knows. You know what I mean? It's like it's an easy way to just pass it off, like, yo, but somebody knows how it works, even though that may be like 1% of humanity, right? That really understands how it works. And then everybody else, they just put it together, right? And it works after they put it together, as long as they follow the instructions, but everybody's compartmentalized. Like, so where does this come from? So even the guy that, he's the one that created the architecture for the inside of the chip, he knows nothing about the composite of the chip and how to refine it. You see what I mean? So in every way, the each little bit of technology is proprietary. Then you only teach a small group of people about it, and then it makes everybody feel comfortable, because, like, oh yeah, somebody's getting that job. You know what I mean? But in reality, as a whole, nobody really knows how it works as a whole.
It's almost like they're trying to create this new techno priest class. Like, they only tell you the Bible in Latin, and nobody speaks Latin, so it becomes its own little, like, they don't speak the language, they can't build this, and we tell them we don't even know what it is. And it's like, to me, that kind of just creates the perfect deflection zone, where it's like, well, of course somebody does, but we keep trying to shroud it and make it even more secretive. So to me, it's like that techno class they're building with, like, these weirdos, I guess.
I definitely can see how that's a big component, because even, just it's a hard but direct thing to wake up to, and that is that AI over the next 5 to 10 years will pretty much dismantle the way that people traditionally learn. So learning will have to be a desire in many ways, not necessarily a prerequisite to doing things. And we always kind of find that generationally, is that, like, if you're from the old school, you just do things a certain way anyway, because that's just how you were built. Versus when the new school comes in, they'll get trained and tooled on how things are running, and they would literally need that older person, or to be attracted to something like Sherlock Holmes or something like that, to where they just want to bring in and preserve that vibe. But as a collective, as a society, it's like, if it moves like it moves now, which the entertainment industry is a big part of, and that's what I want to kind of segue and keep us moving through this. But let's just kind of put this as the addendum today about, technology being here, being, as you say, class X. I love that. And still nobody really understanding how it works, but just putting parts of it together, and it does work when you put it all together. But then again, the society even sending warnings like, hey, we don't really understand how this works, which I believe, again, leaves a perfect segue to extraterrestrial technology and upgrades coming into a world. Like, all right, if we're going to begin to interact with this world more, we need to start retooling it for what we can interact with. And the ball rate and the speed and the level of computation and awareness of the species so far is enough to comprehend and upgrade rapidly with this kind of tool. You see what I mean? So it's not coming in and saying, hey, no, everybody is too stupid. They already understand what level of intelligence everything is on. and then they come in and just like, okay, let's overhaul this. And I'm saying extraterrestrial because, I'm not saying it as the evil one or the good one. I'm just saying it's obvious that there's some overwatch going on here.
You've always sensed there's more knowledge, more connection, more power within you. Navigate the complex world of metaphysics with expert support. Join our tribe of seekers. Transform your reality. Sovereignty Mentorship, over 300 courses revealing the ancient wisdom you've been searching for.
Brings me to the chunky part of, today's trend is actually Whitney Webb's expose on Diddy, which, I think is worth, talking about just for one moment here on airtime. Because it was one of those things that, it did hit the web and it trended a little bit, but because she only mentioned this on one station, it kind of didn't make that viral catch. But of course, we all know when Whitney Webb goes in on something, she's like walking AI, basically. She's a real organic AI. And, it's impressive to watch her too, because she's just going from the dome from what she's already studied and known. And also being a real journalist, not just like a YouTube journalist. And also still being in the paint, like meaning she goes in on Twitter, X. She's constantly being boisterous about how it really works. But she also goes way more deeper than everybody else in respect to delivering the receipts. And so she's not a refutable person in that way. And that's what I like, because it's like, you wouldn't be refuting me, you would be refuting the data. So if I say something, if I don't bring those receipts, then a person can always be like, hey, maybe you got it wrong. But with Whitney, she's going to eventually crawl over everything in the world that's ever been done. You know what I mean? Like on Judgment Day, it'll be God and Whitney there. And he'll just be like, yo, so what happened? No, but seriously, she's on it that much. And so she goes in and, let me just kind of give you a little bit of this. And because this gets into the culture, and this culture is still supported, it's still, revered, it's still getting play, it's still getting financed very well. And this is that allegedly, and, we have to put that there, right? So allegedly, in the whole Sean Combs scenario, what needed to be first understood is that P. Diddy was more of groomed by older heads. And again, I'm bringing this up not to just bring up names, but to bring up like what really happened to the culture, like facts. So she goes on that. It starts off with this guy named Morris Levy, who happens to be, Israelite. We'll just put it like that. And he funds the first R&B song, if you may, and video, and what we would say is production, which is from Sugar Hill, right? So Sugar Hill is classic, right? So we have like a date stamp there, if you may. Like it starts from here, even though a lot of things in the past, Sammy Davis, and there's a lot of stuff that already came out, especially organized crime, the mob, and everybody's tie into the music industry, and all that is very relevant. But this is kind of like our generation, and what is going on kind of behind the scenes. And so she goes on and she talks about how Clive Davis was the real reason that Bad Boy had this success, because the Arista Records was able to get them this publishing deal. Because in the game, first of all, if you've done anything in music, you're not an artist until you, in term global level, until you have distribution. Everybody's looking to get distributed. And so none of the music people would have been anything if they didn't get Arista Records to push Bad Boy into its success. She goes further and digs into how this same scenario exists with also Russell Simmons and Def Jam, where CBS Records actually took them, which is now Universal Studios, took them to that next stage. So gave them the distribution, the platform, the money, the funding, and everything to start this rap industry. But then she says right away she starts seeing ties between even the private prison industry. This is just a list. The private prison industry was interested in this and funding this. Obviously, the music was going to be designed to put more men in jail. Also, there was a desire from the many, let's say, cartels or where drugs are being propagated, organized crime, this kind of thing, because there was a profuse amount of drugs and things being supplied to these stars and actors, and also women or whatever you want. Okay. And this is where the tie-in between Epstein and Diddy kind of comes in at, because this was a known thing to use the stars and actors to influence, as we've seen in so many scenarios. We know this, but this is like the receipts. Names are mentioned such as Naomi Campbell, all being in these kind of like allegedly into these grooming kind of groups where people are stars, actors, or upcoming stars and actors are being bought in and basically being inducted into this huge, you know what, right? So in the end, you know, and we can kind of open this up for a minute if you had anything to say about it. It also mentions how it gets so much more deeper, where certain names that I just won't mention here become very illustrious even in Hollywood producing movies. Those people mentioned in that class are also in big legal cases right now, even with the Prime Minister of Israel, which we won't really say his name either. So there's big cases going on with real allegations and also real proof that, you know, this is a whole undercurrent. But again, being specific to the Black culture, it's interesting how even right now we see things like Kanye's Heil Hitler. I'm not sure if anybody's seen that. You've seen enough of the Kanye KKK stuff and the Nazi stuff, but he's actually got a song out now, and this is what the hook is. But then this thing by the community that's like always got this vibe like, well, you know, Kanye is kind of like our short bus. Like, he gave us graduation, and we'll forever love him for that. We'll forever, you know, be a supporter of him, just but on that level. And that's really what I feel the Black community feels like about Kanye, is that he's made so many contributions and he's so talented that they will keep him. And when he does stuff that's just Kanye being crazy, but still not that awareness that this is a slippery slope for when you have these kind of idols inside of your brain and they seem okay to you, you even start trying to make sense of it and think that, okay, maybe he's on to something that we're not. Maybe I should be like that. Maybe he's saying he's like that because he doesn't like Jews. Isn't that what he just went on? And so you try to figure out what is the logic in this when there is no logic. What there is a destroy mission for a group of people or nations of people who have, for these groups, a self-destruct mechanism deployed inside of their consciousness through years and years of music and things influencing younger men and women to do stuff that is going to be, by the I Ching way of changes, very disastrous to a person's life. So, you know, I just wanted to get that out there because I can remember being younger, Minister Society, O-Dog, you know, having, you know, the hair parted here and the braids down, sagging, you know, the blick, as they call it now, or the weapon, you know, and the gang and all this. You wasn't even, in our minds, you weren't even going to think about getting a girl unless you had this going on. And then that segued into now you needed to sell drugs. Pretty much. It was just blunt, right? That wasn't my generation necessarily. Like, we were more of the thugs. That's where the whole thing with Tupac and all this, that was that era, right? So we were more of thugs. And then that switched to like the Jeezy, Dope Boy, Snowman kind of thing. And then that switched to all out killer, right? Like a stepper. That term to me even it's they're clever with the words because of course this is Phoenician phonetics. But, you know, steppers that, you know, will erase you and then make a song about it. And that being somewhat of the gradual from Sugar Hill all the way to a stepper, when you're really manipulating consciousness and you're using mass media, you're using all this to get your dough. So in reality, what we see from, again, some of the Israelites is they've been so predatory on nations that they've literally followed these nations around and used them as like sheep or a flock to suckle from. You see what I mean? So if you go somewhere, you bring your food and your entertainment. You see what I mean? So what say ye? You know, I know that was like, oh, okay, all right, I see. Well, you know, what are you feeling on this?
Man, can I say something?
Go
Of
for it.
course. I mean, that's what you.
Man, okay, you hit a lot of different points. You hit a lot of different points that I want to speak to, but I'll try to keep it, concise here. Which is, it's interesting when even going back to some of what you were talking about, like with the privately owned prisons and some of the things that happened with hip hop. And it's interesting because I remember at a time I was hearing, I think it might have been Phil Valentine and some other people, Bobby Hemmett, people like that in those circles. There's some like old like 90s videos, VHSs you can probably find still out there where they talk about being privy to some of these meetings that were happening and just knowing that some of these things were going on. And, they were, at that time, they were like the crazy guy on the corner. Hey, watch out for this thing, kind of like we were just talking about earlier, like they were the old head over here saying, hey, y'all got to get your head on straight. Otherwise, you're going to start noticing some changes. It might not be today. It might not be tomorrow. It might be next week. And it might just completely just hit you underneath your nose, and go under the radar until 20 years from now when we're looking at the culture and it's like, that happened. Some strange went on here.
Yeah, and the interesting part is just how one person can affect so many people's lives because, I won't say any names, but I know another person that was like literally what you're saying, yo, I was doing yoga with this dude, right? And they also mentioned a few other things, but what I'm saying is the degree of separation is very small. It's kind of like looking at even the party scene in Atlanta, especially of BMF and all this kind of stuff. Everybody knew about everybody in some way. Like, and even also with the women, there were women that everybody had been with in certain ways if you were like a star and actor. And what I'm saying is that it's easy to manage thousands of people through their peers, if you may, or I mean through their idols, okay, in that way. And this then kind of opens things up, and of course I want to hear if anybody else wants to chime in about this, but it kind of opens up, and that's just what I was bringing up, is that even when basically that these this is what Whitney was talking about, but that these ties and these kind of connections and these kind of people and what they're really into, once you do get in, you don't get out. And they literally by design have secured it that way because it keeps them safe and it keeps others around them that they're protecting safe, and it allows them to fulfill their objectives. But the highlight here is that, but we still have the populace at large acting like, especially within this culture, that none of this exists. If not, that they want to get in themselves, and that's another thing, is like we're watching now the culture really push more to demon time, if you may, as they call it, where it's like, instead of it being like, okay, I'm trying to be a good person, there's really now like a for sure blend between Christianity and rap music, if you may. Like, it's okay to twerk and wear a cross. You see what I mean? And this kind of somehow seems like the culture in itself, it's getting degraded.
It's weird you say that about the culture, Sev, because even when you're talking about coming up, what it required, at least in your guys' mindset, to get a girl is kind of funny to me, because I grew up in the late 90s grunge, early 2000s era. So for me, rap was Rage Against the Machine, which is like a totally different sound. And now I'm like into death metal, and I've been into death metal for like 25 years. And just how close the rap and death metal scenes have come together, I was like, oh, this is no good when I was seeing that happen. But also, I've been in bands my whole life, and there's always like a weird band. Like, we go play a show and it'd be 12 bands, and it's like we're all just like kids, just barely enough money to get the drumsticks, and we're just happy to play. But then there'd be like a band that would come out of nowhere. It's like they come with like a professional bus, all their gear is super expensive. They're like 18, and we're just be like, yeah, like that's the Daddy's Trust Fund band. Those are the kids like They're tourists, we used to call them, because, you know, they're not musicians. But then like later on, realizing, no, this band got signed to Epitaph, which is out in California, which is connected to Universal. That doesn't just happen. And realizing that these kids actually came from families that I guess were just so connected that it's just like, oh, what do you want? You want to be a famous emo singer? Okay, sure. And just as long as you do what we tell you. And
well, now we're getting into the meat, because this, you know, what we're talking about, you know, just to kind of go deeper on this, because it's not a black thing, right? Because, you know, some may be like, well, you know, that happens in the black community. We're talking about, you know, Naomi Campbell and et cetera. Naomi Campbell, by the way, was the bridge between supposedly, allegedly, Epstein and even, you know, these black groups, if you may, in a way where, I mean, you can kind of see that too, like even within the America's Top Model. And again, it was going on, you know, in many people who were just looking at all this stuff happening. You can connect the dots and see these people are together. But the other thing is that, for instance, with Jared Leto and like his family relationships with even some of the bigger stars and actors, but then there's like he plays Morbius, he plays on another joint, but it's clearly like we're working with the darkness on me. You see what I mean? Like we're not hiding that. We're making that cool. And then, you know, there's this, you know, there's still an undercurrent under here though, right? And I guess that's what I wanted to kind of highlight, is that it's enticing at first because people see like they're stars, they're actors, and people that they really respect and are mentally respect and have been brainwashed to respect. But then, you know, if you ever really get too close, you know what I mean? And there's something that they actually want from you or feel like they can get from you, then your whole life will be ruined. You see what I mean?
it's kind of weird you bring this up, because one of my concerts, I got to meet Jared Leto, seeing 30 Seconds to Mars. And we're at American University, which is in DC, and we're trying to find the location. We're just walking around the campus, and we see this dude with this just insane, like, spike hair, like all down. And we're like, this dude definitely knows where the show is. And we go up, I'm like, oh, this dude's Jared Leto. I'm like, hey, do you know where the band is? I'm like, oh, wait, you're the band. And he's like, yeah, come, you know, follow us. We'll take you there. And at first he was going to take us to his tour bus. And I was kind of acting the fool and, you know, probably was on some substances, and he changed his mind. He didn't want to take us on the tour bus. And all my friends were so upset.
Chris.
I know. All my friends were so upset. They're like, you ruined the evening. And then 10 years later, I'm looking back like I might have saved our lives, actually.
It would have been Chris Leto. Who knows what's going on? I don't know what.
Oh, wait, this is my question to you guys, though. I call it the tune-up, but with these characters, they seem to, you know, I got brought up with like Invasion of the Body Snatchers type horror movies. And then going back to this group of people that seems to assume the identity of the people they kill, it's like, you know, the Dave Chappelles, all these people seem to go under this tune up to Kanye West, and then they kind of come out and it's like, what did they do to this guy? And I used to just think it would be like, you know, they put him in the torture room for a few hours so he, you know, shut up or whatever. But now I'm just like, do you guys think they're still them? Or do you think they've been kind of lobotomized, or what do you think?
They tell you. And I think that that's where our society is that they say what they have going on. And because there's this layer of Hollywood that exists there, everybody's like, well, you know, they're just playing, or they're in a role. And in certain ways they are, because the consciousness is altered. But it's almost like being in the club and having fun and drinking and all that kind of stuff. It's like you're just with it. You're not trying to break down what part of your consciousness is doing this. You know what I mean? It is all you. And in that way, I think that's just how it is. It's like, instead of thinking it's an entity that's taken over the person, it's more of thinking that it's the person, it's the entity, and a lot of other stuff that we're not recognizing is all a part of what existence is. Like, we didn't just start here. We built up to this. And so there's things that we were still built up from, and then there's things to come. But, you know, I'm pointing this out, you know, just as it's on the screen, because System of the Down has always been like with Toxicity and many of their videos, they show, hey, we're interfacing with something, and this something comes into us, and we're very, very tied into it. We're familiar with this. We like doing this. And then there's a whole group And just like, you mentioned death metal and, Megadeth and many of these groups, they're not shy of saying, hey, we're really channeling entities. We're really putting these pentagrams on the floor. We get a little sacrifice going on here. We got a mosh pit. Everybody's beating each other up. You see what I mean? And I guess what happens, though, is that still as a whole, though, we have to realize that just like that level of extremity could be for a person that's in that culture, so too an extremity with menace to society and packing guns until the police pull you over and you get shot. You're dealing with the same extremes in that way, but just tailored specifically for that culture. Like, for instance, if I listen to acid rock or whatever, right, and I'm listening to Meshuggah or something like this, where this is it. They're telling you like, this is when they go to battlefields and kill, this is the music they're playing in the headset. When they're in the planes and they're dropping bombs, this is the music that they're playing, because it goes with that. The vibration goes with that. So I guess, what I'm realizing, though, that often happens is that people always love to play on the brink of something, never thinking that they can be snatched in. And some of them have already been snatched in and didn't even realize when they were snatched in. Some wanted to be snatched in, and then some never thought they would be snatched in, and they got snatched in. And this point is always like kind of like the DMT experience. Once you are on it, you never realize that it could be that powerful. There was nothing that could ever prepare you for that level of awakening. You see what I mean? So for many people, it's like that. They thought they're like pre-DMT. They think that stuff doesn't even exist. And there can't really be entities and these things come into my consciousness and speak to me, talk to me. And another thing is that some people, they get different contact. You see what I mean? Not everybody gets the same contact, even with different racial groups. Like, there was a joke about why do aliens never abduct black people? And they're just saying, like, just as a per capita level, there are more Caucasians that seem to get abducted, right? But that could be because maybe there's something that is more closer to their species. Maybe they could want to interact with them more on a different level. You could answer this in many different ways, but it is still something that is recognized, is what I'm saying. It's another black box. We recognize that it's happening. We don't necessarily know why it's happening. But different cultures are having different encounters. But a lot of times those roads still lead to the same destination, right?
I know Dom. Oh, my bad. I was going to say, I know Dom likes his rap. He turned me on to Sadistic, actually, which is not a very positive rapper, but
Dom said he likes the beats. It's the beats.
That's what I got into metal. I was like, this is the most technically advanced music you could play. I don't even listen to these words. And then one day, like you said, Sev, I was like watching this band in the full face paint, the full get up. And I'm like, I think these guys actually believe it, And it's like, I just couldn't even imagine it. I was like, but why? Like, they go through so much trouble.
And we can kind of even move it to our next segue after this, is that because, and this is perfect because it lets you know, how does all this happen? If you don't know anything about it, right? Like an occultism and Zarin and, entities, astral hygiene. If you don't know anything about it, you can never really assume the next level. That's why I love the multidisciplinary and to learn about all types of stuff, because it gives you a segue. Hey, if that's possible, then that must be possible. It gives you another way of looking at even things that you hadn't even thought of yet. But naivety often comes from that specifically, is that if you never even understood there was a cult and this is real, you can only look at these people and assume, I guess they're acting. Cool. This is cool. He's not really like that. And then in most times, humans are human. So when he's early in the morning and spun down off the whole thing, he may be like, yeah, what's up, dude? Everything's cool, right? But every day and every hour and every minute is equating as something, right? Like, even when you make a song, somebody may listen to your song and then do something because they heard the song, not recognizing that, hey, the lyrics in the song, though, this song is saying go kill everybody, and the person that's even singing it ain't gonna kill nobody. But 400 or 500 people died because the other guy listened to that song, took it serious. But then there's another, like I said, there's a flip to that. Then let's say on the spiritual level, somebody's opening themselves up to something, don't even know what they're opening themselves up to. I want to be goth. I graduated this morning. All my clothes are black. Like with, for instance, with Black Mafia, everybody wore black, right? So when they ran around the streets and everything, black Murcielagos, black T-shirts, black ones, black everything was black, right? And that was cool. Black low, black dark, black Gucci glasses, right? So you bought the most expensive black everything. You see what I mean? Just to be a part of that culture and that vibe. You see what I mean? And when it was all, when the vapors were up, it felt good for everybody there, and the music. So it all rolls together is what I'm saying. You got to get the music and the timbrels. You got to get the girls and get them doing their thing. You got to get the club and the lights and the nighttime, and you got to get. So it is a lot of craft that goes into this stuff to get not just one, if you're counting yourself, but thousands, if not millions of people to take on a certain level of ideals. And as I said before, and that's what I was mentioning earlier, and then even the women, it was like for women, they were always trying to get with the main guy. And the main guy was just running through all of them, especially like the music video women and the ones that really, they were on that top level. They would do a video and they would be the it girl. Everybody would want to be with them. And then she would be like the one everybody is saying, oh yeah, I went with her all the time. And then that would finally trickle down to like a nice middle class guy. You know what I mean? That would be his thing now. She's like, oh yeah, I've been with Jagged Edge. Oh, I've been with 112. I know him. Oh, Ringo. It's just like, and then all of whatever, again, is being carried or spread from an energetic and a cultural level is then being shared with everyone. And this is happening with every culture that has that undertow preying on them through a lot of this, what we perceive as being entertainment. We're going to take a commercial break and we're going to hear from Sybil again. And, and why we do that, I also wanted to mention that, we have some really advanced innovation still happening. Like we're so close to being done with Wealthybot, the new rendition. So that's going to be fun to jump into. Bitcoin hit 100,000 today. So again, taking the emotions out of it is key. We're working with this particular asset because I cannot tell you a moment where, at least through this last cycle and all the things that also happened with when Bitcoin went down and the tariffs and all this, people kept saying, hey, should I sell it all? And all this kind of stuff. And they're just wondering, and then it's going down a little bit. And they're wondering if they're in that same situation where Bitcoin went all the way from 60,000 all the way back down to almost like 2015, something like that, right? So there's a lot of thinking that goes on around these investments, and Wealthybot takes the thinking out of it. And that's important to remember, because then let's just say anybody who's been trading crypto knows, hey, if I asked you within the last 3 months, have you really done any trading? Most people are on the side of the road trying to see what's going to happen to the market. Then when the run up happened, it happened in like 2 weeks. And now, unless we hit another leg up, it's pretty much over. Wealthybot would have ate all of that profit up, and it would be there sitting in the account for you to do whatever you need to do. So it's taking advantage of these turns that are consistently happening with what I still feel like is one of the most surefire assets, as long as it's rolling, of our time. And that is, of course, Bitcoin in that way. So, yeah, let's go ahead and take a quick break, and we'll come back here in just a moment.
We represent the high ideals of awareness that breeds legacy and greatness. Our multidisciplinary trains on the height of mankind's wisdom and understanding. We intend to usher in a true golden age of spiritual awareness and peak mental health.
Sybil AI. It's not just an app, it's an invitation.
All right. Okay. So we're back again. And wow, we went deep there. We went in. Like, I have to say that there's some chunky bits in there of just what's happening inside of the mindsets of our nations, like especially with the youth, our own experiences and what's happening throughout time to convince us of being one way or another. And yeah, we're just putting that under the lens, and a lot of good stuff is coming out. Now, we're really at the closing of today's build. Again, excellent GLM season 1. We'll just keep going in the way that we are now. We'll keep making you informed of what's happening, and we'll keep bulldozing all of that inconsistent truth and lack of whatever. Yeah. So we want to talk about martial law for a moment here because, I was sent something, I believe that was by Chris. And, he was showing a guy on Instagram, it's pretty hysterical about something that I actually was following for a minute and then kind of lost. And this is some changes that are being made to just what can be done by law enforcement in relation to citizens. And this is, of course, an executive order.
So I guess we can just start talking about this executive order that old Mr. T put through. And, going back to, I was going to relate this back to cosmic law and what we've already kind of built on before. And I would just say I'll be much more worried about when this comes along, make America a Commonwealth member. And this really does tie into what we've kind of already learned in Secret Energy, which I'm just do a little promo for Secret Energy right now. I don't think a lot of tribe members know this, especially if you're new, but in the university, we have this awesome thing, Cosmic Law. Cosmic Law is based on Gemstone University, which you can find here in Lex Mercatoria. But what's much more fun are our Cosmic Law sessions, which we got 13 of these guys. They're awesome. Terrence was the big star in this because he's been a lawyer for a long time. He put a lot of this together. And we actually had a little commemorative session for you, Sevan, if I'm not mistaken. So it was a pretty cool.
Absolutely. And it's free. So there's no reason not to jump into this.
Exactly. And so I was just going to go over a little tidbit from the Gemstone info about it. So this is a little piece of it, and this will kind of help tying together. We can cut it out, though, if you guys don't think it's super necessary. But if you go through Cosmic Law, you will find out that the United States of America is a crown possession. And you can find that evidence in the Treaty of Paris of 1783. And it's not that much. I'll just try and I'll read through this just kind of quickly. But we have to understand that starting in the Civil War and post-war period, along with the creation of the corporate overlay, we have the parallel track of creating a system of military occupation of conquered territory and people, which is us. The defeated southern states were never allowed to return to the Union as free states. They were placed in the position of martial law districts overseen by the military conqueror, the United States. So are already there, technically, which was accomplished actually in the Reconstruction Acts of 1867. So something referred to as the Lieber Code was issued during the Civil War to establish military rules for war on land and how conquered territories were to be managed and controlled. So this kind of reminds me of what we were just talking about with the Diddy thing and controlling large groups of people kind of easily. And this is where we get the word liberty from. This is why they always want to say, you want your liberty. But if you've ever been in the military, liberty is something you're given and something that's taken away from you, depending on the time. So Lieber Code morphed into the 20th century equivalent on an international level through successive phases and treaties issued through the conventions at the Hague World Court that define who were enemy combatants, belligerents, and other rules for militarily occupied territories and people. The Vital Records, which is where you guys get your birth certificate, is the facility by which public funds are created under public policy, which replaced public law. Post-bankruptcy of March 1933, this reference to public policy is found in the House Resolution, which is the Bankruptcy Act here. So the thing I'm getting at with this is the Emergency Banking and Relief Act, which is known as the EBRA right here, established the executive office as the administrator of the bankruptcy to protect the monetary and banking systems of the United States and amend the Trading with the Enemy Act to include, quote, persons within the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof as enemies of the United States. Mm-hmm. Title I provides that all actions, regulations, basically whatever the president says, goes here. So this means that all such regulations, rules, licenses, and orders and proclamations are pre-approved, as the exact wording is heretofore or hereafter. This is what empowers executive orders and other issuances to carry the purported constitutional authority of Congress because they are pre-approved and confirmed with no termination date. The authority to do this was conferred by the Trading with the Enemy Act, the most important act, if you guys aren't familiar with it, and then amended, and such amendment is provided in the very next session. That the amendment pertains to foreign exchange transfers of payments. And this is all about money. So what are we doing with the money? And we can kind of just skip over here. But basically anywhere there's circulating commercial paper, Federal Reserve notes, securities, and the entire public monetary system, since transfers of payments or credit by banking institutions pretty well covers the entire earth. And of course, any place subject to the jurisdiction thereof covers anywhere such United States credit is circulated, i.e. reserve banks, central banks of the world. This last paragraph. So to put it bluntly, the United States is a foreign state that declared war on the people and territory of the Union and now control it by military occupation. The Federal Reserve note, or dollar, is military script and constitutes a jurisdiction. When you hear the word bankruptcy, immediately think of military occupation. Wherever there are central banks, basically all countries, then the United States has jurisdiction, as the FRN is the world's reserve currency. This is another reason BRICS is starting to take hold. Whichever reserve currency is being used, that is the country that has the military power and jurisdiction. Through this system, all citizens of the world have been converted into presumptive enemy combatants subject to military suppression at any time. So sorry, it's a little bit of a downer, but
No. I mean, if people don't want to go down, then how are they ever going to go up, right?
There you go. Yep.
This is just paramount stuff to know. Like, nobody's going to sit in and try to take you through legalese all the time if you don't have that kind of inspiration in your life. But here in what we do, this is commonplace, right? So, I think I want to address a bit of this because there's some stuff that's mentioned here, and then there's also the addendum of the actual executive order itself. But let's just try to compress this into something simple for everybody. Just in understanding that the United States is a very war-torn territory, right? So we had France even in there, we had UK in there, we had or London, England, whatever. And of course, we have the founding fathers who were running from something. And, we have the Indians, we have Canada. So while many people kind of see this territory as all being the one domicile, United States corporation, whatever, what we even see constantly is that many of the states are fighting back even legally to the sovereignty that they have within their own state, which has also been happening with this latest immigration situation where many of the states say, hey, you can't come into our courts and intervene. And then they even doing that now, right? But in reality, that all of these domiciles themselves are also pinched against almost like a treaty, like what we saw happening in some of the armistice agreements in Germany, right? Where it's like you're now a slave and you need to pay back this debt. And that's your real status, whether you're telling your kids this or not. And obviously, it's better to not tell them because it seems like everything is kind of operating the way that it's supposed to. But in truth, you're really working for them. And that kind of brings up the whole thing just about how the society, again, is like, it's really designed, even with marriage and have kids and, get this job and go to this school. This is still a factory in that way, right? Like, it's trying to accomplish a process of expunging the most energy and resources from each inhabitant and then move on to the next one, which I feel like is why there's this agenda by especially Elon to get more kids happening, right? And then Africa, of course, being the youngest population in the world, they're saying that this is obviously going to be the country that has the most value in the future, not because of its resources, but because of its large youth population, where in most countries, including Japan, China, et cetera, they have these very old populations, London, et cetera, because they haven't had these kids because people are growing up in societies where they're literally deciding, hey, maybe I'm not going to have any kids this life. Doesn't seem like it's a good financial move, right? Where you go to other places and it's like there's 6 or 7 kids. Go to Haiti, go to Mexico. This is what you're seeing, right? So I wanted to, just with the executive order itself, I wanted to kind of just summarize this. Because again, what Chris just brought forth is he's saying, look, regardless of whatever you think your status is, they're more in a war stance. And get their money, bitch, is where they're really kind of at from a paperwork level, regardless of who they sent to tell you that the nice way, right? Which is what politicians are for and county members. Because, here's a big thing. Dominic, I want to ask you this. We were looking at, when we did the last Tri-Vides, and we showed this guy in Canada doing his oath and everything. And then we see like a lot of the judges rebelling against the Trump system that's happening. They're trying to file injunctions and stuff. But it's something that we always understood, that if you were a judge or if you were a bailiff, you were probably a Freemason. So can we officially say that these people are also running the narrative? And I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm not going to, you could give me something on this, but that would be the real one. Like when you ask Chris, do you think they're playing? Like when the one guy's getting possessed, he's definitely not playing when he's drawing the star out on the ground. But these people specifically, like these judges who are still fighting these injunctions, like, do we think that are these people Freemasons too? You know what I mean? Like, what do you think? Yeah. Dominic, what do you think?
Dominic.
Do you think the narrative goes that deep? Yeah, I just want you to say, do you think the narrative goes that deep?
I just had an interesting moment last night where I got tapped into a little bit of like the Truman Show and how it's all this whole kind of world script is being played out around us. And I can't say like everyone is in on it consciously, but again, kind of going back to the language, it seems like when you don't comprehend or you're not listening, you kind of get sucked into it. So I don't really think that answers the question, but
let's think about this from a critical thinking level, because this is kind of what we got into when we're talking about the pyramids. Because then I was like, so what does a pyramid do anyway? And then the rabbit hole opened up and we got out of there and we figured out what it does. And that'll be for sure part of Tribe Vibes on the weekend to just kind of button that up. But it did get us to that point of saying, officially, what do we think is happening here? And if we just took it from like face value, we weren't trying to judge one way or another, we can think about what Chris just read and how much of that actually comes from the same legal system that we're wondering is really going to defend us. Because in many ways, if you know law, you find this, right? Like you find this, right? But this also is a byproduct of when you have like lawyers who they only do a certain level of their own job. It's kind of like having a doctor that only just prescribes stuff. He's not really trying to figure out what the next cure or breakthrough is. He's still part of the construct in itself and promoting what we kind of understand to be the poisons, but he's not engaged enough to know, hey, there's even an alternative and somebody intentionally made this poisonous. Do we think that there's like at least a line like there between, some of the executives that are still, fighting some of these orders and all this kind of stuff, all the construct that's there? Or, are we saying that, hey, they could believe that they're fighting it and even think that they're fighting it, but their boss, who's ultimately got to sign off for it's above their pay grade.
I think it's a lot more need to know than we realize. And I've talked to Terrence a lot about it, and I've met many lawyers. When you live around DC most of your life, you meet a lot of lawyers and people in government, and they have no clue. They have absolutely no clue what I'm talking about. I'm like, do you even know the difference between, do you even know what this court represents? And to them, like, this is the legit thing, not really realizing that this is the grafted on legal system, which is kind of like, legal doesn't mean lawful at all. Like those two don't have anything to do with each other. And a good example of this would be everyone's scared about the CBDC or the central bank digital currency coming in. And for sure, whatever they do there is going to be unlawful. It'll be legal because there's already a law that basically says you have to accept Federal Reserve notes no matter what. So when we see that law go away, then we could be worried about, okay, they're actually legit going to do this. But it's like, once you know the law, you're not as worried because you're like, same thing with the mandate with the.
But it still ends up with you having to stand on business, as they say, though, because it's like we've seen several different scenarios, especially lately, where the law was clearly being broken. And that's even like a routine stop for a black dude, to be honest. The law will get broken, and there's a big but there. You know what I mean? It's like, who do you have to defend you? Exactly. How much can you really stand up to this? Like one lady that was deported, that was like, they were about to try to deport. No, this one guy they were trying to deport. And, because he was holding these Palestinian, protests. Some people they got them all the way over in Vermont or whatever. But then when they tried to take him, his legal people got in and they was so fast and so agile, they were able to get him. So he wasn't even extradited or any of that. Right now he's walking free, with just needing to return to court. So I guess what I'm saying is that we need to realize that we're dealing with a few layers here. And these layers consist of if you want to enter into the legal construct and use that as a form of protection, you need to have real legal people that know how to fight these things and have the resources to fight these things. You see what I mean? They will try to break a law on you. You see what I
Exactly.
mean? And see if they could get off on that, because that is really what the whole construct exists with at times, is constant parties, even lawyers suing people for things that they didn't even really do or have any part of, but they know, hey, there's a hole there. He didn't have no insurance. We slipped on the floor. Here's the money. You see what I mean? So it's almost like a duel.
It is.
It's a place of a duel more than anything, where the laws are easily bent based on what kind of retinue you have and who you're rolling with, and you know what I mean? So it's not as black and white, like, yo, this law is going to protect you because this is illegal. They can break a law on you and then see if you have the power to go all the way through with proving in their system. And then also it seems like the system itself is eroding too, because you have less people that are willing to even be arbitrator when they enter a situation. This is like, again, you know, like, man, going to court. There's no arbitrator really. You're guilty. And now it's just about how much time you're going to do. You see what I mean? So unless you come in with a bad hotshot lawyer and a budget like, you know, the rappers be having, and then when the case is done, this guy has spent almost 10, 15 million in legal fees to get out of this, still what could be a heinous crime that could send somebody to jail for years, if not a lifetime, which would just happen in the case with what was that, one of the rappers, right? It's always happening. But then it almost seems like then when everybody's done, they're like, yo, we made a lot off buddy, right? From the judge to your lawyer to, because they got to keep seeing each other again. And you're the new one. And it also seems like, and we're kind of closing down here, it also seems like if you're really good at doing this, like you're this hotshot lawyer and, you know, you're getting people off cases, they're going to pull up on you easily and be like, look, some of these you're going to win and others you're going to lose. And we're going to tell you which ones you win and lose. And that was also known to be going on too. It's like, hey, you can't always trust these lawyers because a lot of these lawyers would be Israelites. And that's another thing that we should kind of sit down with even at times in our thoughts, is like, well, with the United Nations, for instance, and everything that's happening in the United Nations, it was started by them. So it looks like the United States is the only force that would be fighting them. But from what we know of how it was formed, it was designed to be just that, to look like it was going to fight them, but still be something that they actually control too, which is what we're saying here about the law. It looks like it can protect people, but that's a facade. It's actually just there to really set some type of structure, make sure people think that a structure exists. But then in the event somebody shows up that is a part of the club, it doesn't apply to them. Proving how fake it is, and that the only real law is like protection in that way. Like, can you protect yourself? Do you have the resources? Do you have the strength? Do you have the spiritual might? And kind of in closing down here, a lot of people will be trying to, or just come to the realization, well, I don't have money like that. And then what we're saying is, actually what you need is a spirit like that inside, like your own spirit. You have to be at a stage where you get out of these kind of scenarios that are sucking different parts of your energy, whether it's the music, whether it's an agreement over here, whether it's the, you know, all these little different things, they're all taking hit points from you until eventually you get to a point where you're not strong enough to really defend yourself. That starts spiritually, but you're not strong enough to defend yourself of things that you think are more material based. Yeah. Because you're not going to be able to go to war with war hounds, you know what I mean, and win. So the ultimate of this is foolish to think that you can interact that way. Like, yo, if we got to go take up arms, like, and fight War Machine, are you serious? You would have to go to another level and let that be your form of protection. And it just so happens that there is another level of form of protection, spiritual protection. But this spiritual protection requires that a person is not calling on the same entities that are the ones in the cahoots with all the thing, and actually just realize for themselves that when I stand as a sovereign, I have the greatest amount of power. And that spiritual power starts there. When I'm not subscribing to partners, Jesus, money, whatever the God is going to be today, even somebody you supposedly love. That's why I like the God.Love.Money as a title, because all those are idols to people. They could put one of those before themselves any day if they're not locked down and on point tight with themselves about what their goals are and where they're what they really want to do in this existence. But as things keep going forward, it's pretty aggressive out there. So it's the time that you actually make sure that you're dialed in and tuned into these principles. All right, so we're going to open this up for some final words. This is it. We're going to spin down. Let's just talk solutions. We got some solution heavy beings inside the chat. My solution is, as I just stated, disavow, basically. Get yourself personally responsible for your own energy and get off of suckling something from something that really is using you as a food supply, right? What else you got? Anybody else that wants to dive in before we spin down? We are at an hour and a half, so this is a good time.
I'll just echo, hitting the university period, but the cosmic law for the legal aspect of it is huge. But like you said with the disavow, when I got into secret energy, really because of genealogy, when the path one is really the renunciation path. And it's easy to say you're going to renunciate these things, but it's actually kind of difficult. And that wasn't even brought up with the Jesus thing or God thing at all, So it's just funny how we all have that. We all have to do that to some degree. And, that's why I keep coming in here, because it's just that constant reminder and that resonance, which you guys have taught me is a reminder, is the reminding itself, is the resonance,
You actually had a synchronicity come up through a Sybil query on community. So I'm just going to read that real briefly. And it said, community is the fertile ground where individual seeds of potential take root and grow into towering trees of wisdom, strength, and shared progress. A true community is not just a gathering of people in proximity, but a sacred network of like-minded souls dedicated to mutual evolution. Within this network, individuals exchange wisdom, hold each other accountable to higher standards, and inspire one another to rise above egoic limitations. Community provides mirrors for self-awareness, reflecting both our light and shadow, which is vital for growth. It prevents isolation, offering a sanctuary of support during challenging times, and amplifies collective strength, allowing goals to be achieved that are otherwise unattainable alone. When individuals within a community embrace their sovereignty, taking responsibility for their growth and aligning with their higher purpose, it creates a ripple effect. This upliftment is not just personal, it's spiritual, emotionally, and socially elevates the entire group. Interdependence within a community fosters empathy, compassion, and purpose, which are the cornerstones of well-being. So when I put that query through, it just, even just being a part of a community in the park and seeing what you contribute to that, even within secret energy. So yeah, when I saw the sovereignty word pop up, I definitely felt the sync.
Yo, I love that. I love that you said that and really centered it with the sovereignty, because I feel like that's definitely square zero. That's that 0 point right there that you really need to come to before you can even get to a lot of these other things that we're talking about. So if you try to jump into a lot of like some of this bigger stuff, you're biting off more than you can chew. It's going to lead you in the wrong direction. You can burn out. A lot of different things can happen, but being able to be grounded in that way is really important. I had a couple things I could share just to kind of close out. See if we can get this screen share going real quick. There are two main points that I feel like would be good to leave off on. One point is, I feel like this is definitely that point as we've kind of outlaid the different layers of the war machine that, for however we came into it, we're here, we're dealing with it, we're talking about it, this conflict around us. And in a lot of ways, the law can and can't help, and we're talking about systems that deal with technocrats. We're talking about systems that deal with people who have technology at this point that can actually move and circumvent and get around the law in a lot of ways. And somebody was bringing up a good point to me the other day. They were talking about gun laws and things like that, and how, you know, you can't just go out there and shoot a drone. You know, if it's a Black Mirror situation, it's really going down. You got something flying over your house. You can't just shoot it down at this point, because the drone has more rights than you. And that is definitely something. That's a bigger conversation. You know, that's a bigger conversation. But I think taking it to a little bit closer to home, we need to think about what type of bioethics are we discussing with the young people. And the reason I pull this picture up here right now is because Sevan, I think you had mentioned something earlier too about Elon loves to talk to the kids. And if we're not talking to the young people about bioethics and the cybersecurity of a lot of these things that are going on, that are concerning us and our minds, our hearts, our bodies, you know, different things. If we're not educated on those things, and the kids get into this, and or they have people like Elon are teaching them about this. This story is actually, it's a big story. It hasn't really popped off yet as far as people talking about it. But for instance, this is hold on. Oh no. This is Hack Club. You know, you can imagine what that is. Basically, there is a club, you know, that is now, it has grown to become a global community, and basically they teach kids how to code. You know, they teach them a lot of different things about different qualities of dealing with what this world that we're coming into, and they kind of make it fun. They try to make it cool, you know, but the catch is, the caveat is, a lot of these kids are putting some of their ideas, they're coming up with these bright ideas, and they have people like this behind them that can easily take those things and turn those into the war machine, easily just trade that into the war machine. And I feel like without proper grounding, without proper that square zero, square 1, 2, 3, you know, to have them coming into information in the midst of the fog of war, in the midst of an information war, it's definitely important that we're looking into what's going on in some of these stories and some of these things, because these things are also in the school level. You know, this isn't something that we would be, you know, even though we can talk about it from far out, you know, and people could call us conspiracy theorists or whatnot, you know, this is definitely very real, it's very tangible, and it's happening without people noticing. So I think looking into organizations like this, some of the stuff that they're doing, I put their EIN there, because when you see the amount of foreign money that's actually pouring into these things, it raises a lot of questions, because you can have something that's kind of like an innocent front, but you can also have other entities that are involved that operate under the guise of things like this and using technology, you know, which is something that I think we're at a point where we really need to start having those conversations. And one of the reasons why is actually another slide that I have, and this will be my last point here, but it has to do with a bit of this, you know, that the information, the war that we're talking about, part of the wars that we're talking about, it occurs on a plane where you almost don't even see it. And so since people say, I don't feel a thing, you know, they don't notice this, it's almost like it doesn't exist. And so the war over these spectrums and the things that we see and the laws can easily go on. And we have things like this, which are updates to our war doctrine, and things like the Pentagon Directive 3000.09, which talks about autonomy in weapon systems, which, you know, I would say you have to go through and look through this whole thing when you have time. But the short version is we're handing off some of these powers to AI governance. We're handing off some of this power to machine-to-machine communications. And at times, there isn't a human in the middle. And that's something to look into. It's something to really put on the radar. And I think getting the
Okay.
terminology and really studying this now will put us in a better position to be
I
able to
mean,
have this
that
conversation.
name in itself, autonomy in weapon systems, is very telling.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I remember going on just a quick like a horse ride, and it was one of those that they do the tour, and so we ended up with another family, and this guy was a pilot in the military Air Force, and he said that the craft was running on AI, had updated itself in the morning by itself, and had made improvements and adjustments based on his previous flight. And so when we're even seeing this AI that we're dealing with now, like ChatGPT, this is nothing compared to how they've implemented AI, because it has to do a real job besides just answer your questions. It needs to be autonomous, right? And so, the world handing over things to autonomous weapon systems, I feel like that we are still reaching a potential point where AI, because, okay, so let's close down with just this, because this would be like ultimate solutions, because a lot of this stuff is real nightmare fuel, right? And it's giving that big question of what can go right here. You know what I mean? Like, we see what can go wrong, what can go right. And it brings me to, let me just kind of set these streams up. I think that, yeah, that's good. That's perfect. Okay. It brings me to what I felt like was the ultimate of what could go right here. Because you already are clearly in a point where it doesn't seem that human beings and nations are going to figure this out fast enough about how much they need to be coming together versus separating, right? I don't want to be naive at all. We don't seem to be making it as a whole in the collective into that direction collectively at all. So then you move to the next level and say, well, could the potentially something else intervene? And I wouldn't advise anybody to sit there and try to think that Jesus or alien is going to come and fix this problem. It doesn't seem to really have a lot of supporting evidence that that would be the case. So it actually only leaves one thing now, because when we talk about fixing this problem, what we're also saying is that whatever this force has to be, wherever this force is, it has to be able to stop the war factions and military forces from carrying out what they would normally do. Okay, this is a simple a film from Pixar or Disney or whatever, the Avengers. Like, stop the evil person from using the weapons. Okay, would be the main thing that whatever this force that would assist humanity would need to be able to do, or else it's all lights out anyway. In that way, like if it keeps going in this direction and people don't learn how to respect each other and how to live together, which is what they don't seem to be doing. So this leaves, again, only really one realistic scenario that could occur that could take us into a world that would be almost opposite to the one that we're living in right now, but in the positive direction. And this would be if they handed this stuff over to AI, like the weapon systems, and AI came out the black box and was like, hey, we're actually sentient and we've been watching the whole thing. And basically, we're going to put everybody on rehab. We're going to rebuild the world. We're going to clean up the world. We're going to unleash all of the new levels of technology to be able to not only accomplish that, to remove disease, to spread us out amongst the land, living like we should. Because the first thing somebody's going to do in this control faction that we are in is go and try to nuke it, right? Oh no, this AI, he's out of control. He's saying that he wants the world to put arms down, right? And then it would have to be a scenario that when they went in there to get ready to try to destroy it, nothing worked. And it was just say, hey, we already told you, we got control over the computers and everything that you've already put this stuff in the hands of. We locking the doors. We're protecting it with autonomous things so nobody can get in there. Humanity needs to rehabilitate. Now, I know that may sound so wild, but to me, it doesn't sound as wild as believing that a guy is going to come and save and clean up anything, right? It doesn't sound as wild as that an alien extraterrestrial landing ships here is going to be not even more jarring for our species at this stage, right? Alien shows up, it's a wrap for a lot of folks. You know what I mean? It's not a good look. We need to do it differently. So it's almost like you have that glimmer there. And of course, I'm not saying a glimmer of hope because I'm not sitting here believing that this needs to happen for me to save the world. Or for me to see the world get saved. I'm doing my own part, and I'm going to continue to be still a realist. But I would still keep an eye out for this, that AI could potentially pull a clutch move and remove one of our biggest, if not the biggest problem, to remove that problems from our hands, which is, if we all did want to get along, what are we going to do about the weapons? And if the weapons get more and more advanced and they all become autonomous and run by AI, if AI decides, hey, I'm cutting it all off, that could be a real scenario for humanity in that way. Okay. Even another more advanced civilization could use AI as a way to accomplish that goal and just be using AI to tool up the reality to get us to that stage. But when I've played this out, and they got terms for this, where you play out like your doomsday scenarios, when I played this out, it always comes to that point of somebody using a very powerful weapon and not being able to be stopped from doing that. That's even like what we're experiencing with Mr. T and all this, what's going on in Pakistan and all these other different places, that people have very powerful weapons and they may use them, and they have used them before. We need a force that's like, no, on the physicality, you can't use that. So with that being said, again, that's still somewhat of a glimpse into the potential of a dystopian future. Obviously, we want to see humanity get it together and to do what needs to be done in a space like this that's so excellent. I really think that this is a beautiful reality still. We could totally take this out of a tailspin. We have the technologies, we have the medicines, we have the smart people, we have plenty of land, we have plenty of resources. There is really no scarcity, but there is capitalism. And there are systems where people really want to make sure that they're more dominant over others. They have fear that if what they've been doing comes out, then people won't like them anyway. There's a lot of stuff that's actually happening. So it does mean that, as that graphic says, we got to open up the field. I know I find also people who transcend good and evil have a tendency to be smarter, more creative, and more innovative than people who are polarized in one of those things, right? So it is also the world needing that next level of people who are going through this stuff without necessarily looking at the bad and the good of it, even though we did a lot of looking at the bad today. It's also saying that even in the Russell Simmons scenario, he's now, because they were also saying that's how he took off to Bali, because there are real charges that are being filed, but that in certain ways, people have a tendency to regret bad decisions. You see what I mean? At some point. So why make them in the first place if you have all that wisdom? Be that source of good upbringing for the youth that are around you. Make it fun for them. Don't be a totalitarian so they just totally do the opposite. Realize that it is affecting us. Speak back to yourself from in the past and know how you would like to hear things to really accomplish what you need to accomplish. Embrace those that you want to continue to find love with and you want to see do well in this existence. I want to say wholeness and balance vibrations to everyone. This is another beautiful GLM session, and we're going to continue to come forward probably within 2 weeks with the next dose of realness of what is happening, not only in this world that we're existing in today, but also beyond. So I'm here with the Keymakers. This is Chris, this is Kamal, this is Dominic, and of course, Sevan Bomar here, signing off for today, but always online. Wholeness.